In the early 1950s, 4 expectant fathers were in the waiting room of a Minnesota hospital. They're waiting. Their wives are in labor. The nurse arrives. The nurse goes to the first man. With glee, she says, "Congratulations, you are the proud father of twins." He said, "Wow, I work for the Minnesota Twins. That is going to be great publicity." But a while later, the nurse comes back, says to the second father, "Congratulations, you are the proud father of triplets." He said, "Oh, wow, I work for the 3M company. That's going to be fabulous publicity." About an hour later, the nurse comes back in, looks at the third man. She said, "Congratulations, your wife has just had quadruplets." He said, "You'll never believe this. I work for the Four Seasons Hotel." With that, the fourth man faints. The nurse runs over to him, tries to wake him up, and all she hears is this: Why did I take that job with 7-Up? Why? Well, we are here to celebrate the birth of a baby. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. And in fact, at Christmas time, many of us are probably like the little boy who got a Christmas present from his grandmother. She sent him a shirt. The only trouble was he had a size 14 neck, and the shirt was a size 12. So as he's writing her a thank you note, he writes, "Dear grandmother, thanks a lot for the shirt. I'd write more, but I'm all choked up." As we come to Christmas time, as we hear the story again, there are many things concerning Christmas about which I get choked up. In the wisdom of God, there are so many beautiful elements to this story. So before this special time is over, before this special day is up, let's consider some of the elements of this story that are so precious, it ought to choke us up. The first thing I want us to see is the place where it all began. And you know the story. Luke says the governor was issuing a census. The governor wanted to tax the people, so the governor had to know how many people there were so he would know how much money he was going to get. So everybody had to go to their hometown to register. Now Mary and Joseph leave Nazareth and they go to Bethlehem. Bethlehem was a small place. It wasn't like Jerusalem. It wasn't like Athens. It wasn't like Rome. It wasn't as big. It wasn't as flashy as any of the other major cities. In fact, Bethlehem was just a little one-horse town that nobody ever thought about. It's amazing. It's amazing to think about that when the Lord of this universe chose to take on human flesh, he did it in Bethlehem. In Bethlehem. It reminds me of a story that a Presbyterian pastor in Columbia, South Carolina tells about taking his family to a Christmas tree farm to search for a Christmas tree. As you might expect, they were looking for the perfect tree. Not too tall, not too thin, not too out of shape. They wanted the perfect tree. And as they were looking, they came across a family from their church, the Marshes. And the pastor remarked, "This place is filled with beautiful trees. It's going to be tough to pick one." Jeannie Marsh replied, "Not for me. I never look for perfect trees. I'm looking for a tree that needs me. Then I'll make it beautiful. Sounds like something God would say, doesn't it? Sounds like something God would say not only about trees, but about towns and people. People like Peter, people like James, people like John, people like you, people like me. So that's the first thing that chokes me up, the place where he was born. So Mary and Joseph get there, the little small town of Bethlehem. They knock on the door of the inn. Of course, nobody's got a reservation. So the only place they can find is in the stable out back. And while Mary is giving birth to her child, on the other side of town, an angel is appearing to shepherds. I wonder how many men's bathrobes have been sold to portray the shepherds in our Christmas plays. And we've taken shepherds and we've made them all cute. We've made them all, they're all dressed up, they're little kids. I even remember a Christmas play at the church where I grew up in. 2 old women were the shepherds. And they had the staff, and their staff was 3 times bigger than they were. And here they come down the aisle, and about the time they get halfway down the aisle, one of them gets tickled. And you know what happens when somebody gets tickled? Somebody else has to laugh. And they were laughing. And when we think about the shepherds, that's what we think about. But that's not what the shepherds were. The shepherds were unclean people. The shepherds could not even attend worship. The shepherds, well, they were just guardians to a bunch of smelly sheep. I doubt any special training was required, just that you be able to be there. Some common sense, some courage. And only God would glorify such an occupation. Can't you imagine the shepherds sitting in a crowd of people that are world travelers? And one person boasts, I've seen the pyramids of Egypt. And another says, I saw Caesar ride through the streets of Rome. And I wonder if the shepherds ever would dare to speak up and say, I beheld the King of Kings, the mighty God, the incarnate Savior of the world, in a manger in Bethlehem. Because that's how God works. God takes the lowliest of people and God glorifies them. And in so, God does what we should always do. Never look down on any human being, because everyone is beautiful in his or her own way. Even the humblest lives can be touched by the peace, by the presence, and by the power of God. These shepherds, their lives were touched, their lives were changed. Nobody else other than God ever would have dared notice them. But that's how God is. He takes those who aren't particularly wise, who aren't particularly good looking, who aren't particularly brilliant, and he takes those and he uses them for his glory. Perhaps you've seen the story that has circulated on the internet about a family who went to a restaurant one evening and they encountered a very awkward circumstance. It's very beautiful, so let me read it to you. The lady writes, we were the only family with children in the restaurant. I set my infant son, Eric, in a high chair and noticed everyone was quietly eating and talking. Suddenly, Eric squealed with glee and said, "Hi there." He pounded his fat baby hands on the high chair tray. His eyes were wide with excitement. His mouth was barred in a toothless grin. He wiggled and he giggled with merriment. And the lady says, I looked around and I saw the source of his merriment. It was a man with a tattered rag of a coat, dirty, greasy, and worn. His pants were baggy with a zipper at half-mast. His shoes were dirty. His shirt was dirty. His hair was uncombed and unwashed. His whiskers were too short to be called a beard, and his nose was so varicose it looked like a road map. We were too far from him to smell him, but I'm sure he smelled. His hands waved and flapped on loose wrists. "Hi there, baby. Hi there, big boy. I see you, Buster," the man said to Eric. My husband and I exchanged looks. What do we do? Eric continued to laugh and answer, Hi there." Everyone in the restaurant noticed. Everyone in the restaurant looked at us and at that man. The old geezer was creating a nuisance, and my beautiful baby, she said, was the cause of it. Our meal came, and the man began shouting from across the room, "Do you know patty cake? Do you know peekaboo?" "Oh, look, he knows peekaboo." No one thought the old man was cute. He was obviously drunk, and my husband and I were embarrassed, she writes. We ate in silence, except for Eric. Eric, who was running through his repertoire for the admiring Skid Row bum, who in turn reciprocated with his cute comments. We finally got through the meal and headed for the door. She says my husband went to pay the check and told me to meet him in the parking lot. The old man sat poised between me and the door. She says I prayed, "Lord, let me get out of here before he speaks to me or Eric." And as I prayed, she said, I drew closer to the man. I turned my back, trying to shield Eric, but Eric leaned over my arms with both arms in a baby's pick-me-up position. Before I could stop him, Eric had propelled himself into the arms of that old, smelly man. And suddenly, a very old, smelly man and a very young baby met in a beautiful relationship. Eric, in an act of total trust, total love, total submission, laid his tiny head upon the man's aged shoulders, full of grime, full of pain and hard labor, and gently, so gently, cradled my baby's bottom, and he stroked his back. No two beings ever loved so deeply for such a short amount of time. The lady said, I stood there awestruck. The old man rocked and cradled Eric in his arms for a moment. Then his eyes opened and squarely looked at mine. And he said in a strong, commanding voice, "You take care of this baby." Somehow I managed, I will, from a throat that contained a stone. He pried Eric from his chest unwillingly, lovingly, as though he were in pain. And she said, I received my baby back. And the man said, God bless you, ma'am. You have given me my Christmas present. She said, I said nothing more than a muttered thanks. And with Eric in my arms, I headed for the car. My husband was wondering why I was crying and holding Eric so tightly. And I was saying, my God, forgive me. I had just witnessed complete and unconditional love shown through the innocence of a tiny child who saw no sin, who made no judgment, a child who saw a soul, and a mother who saw a suit of clothes. She says, I was a Christian who was blind, holding a child who was not. And I felt like God was asking, are you willing to share your son for a moment when he shared his for all of eternity? The ragged old man unwittingly had reminded me to enter the kingdom of heaven was to become like a little child. The people, the place of Christmas, something to get choked up about. But there's one more thing about Christmas that'll choke us up if we'll just think about it. And it's the essential meaning of this sacred day. Because through the babe of Bethlehem, God made himself available to us. We no longer have to worship God from afar. Now he is available to us, with us, and in us. in the person of Jesus Christ. God was willing to come as one of us, willing to get into our mess, willing to love us even when we don't seem lovable. The Daily Telegraph in London reported a story about the famous Neiman Marcus department store. If you're like me, you can't even afford to walk by it. Its prices are sky high, and it has luxury items. However, one year, during the Christmas rush, a hard-pressed employee accidentally gift-wrapped her lunch instead of a customer's gift. So by the time the mistake was discovered, the parcel had been shipped and couldn't be retrieved. And the interesting part, they said, was this: no one ever came forward. The newspaper reported to complain. No one ever complained that he or she received a stale ham sandwich and a moldy orange for Christmas from Neiman Marcus, rather than some luxury item. Store officials are convinced that the recipient of that extraordinary gift decided that coming from Neiman Marcus, it had to be something wonderful. It had to be something special. And if we were to look inside the stable of Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, we would see nothing that looked to the unbelieving eye to be anything special. Some cattle, a donkey, some shepherds, a young peasant couple, a newborn child. You might think, well, that's a quaint scene, but nothing of great significance. But you would be wrong. Why? Because there was a label on the outside cover, visible only to the eyes of faith, that reads, "Sent by God." And because the babe comes from God, sensitive hearts have come to know this: the ultimate Christmas gift is something wonderfully special. Indeed, indeed. Go to your home this Christmas Eve. Carry that special gift with you. Carry it in your heart. Because as John says, the Word became flesh, dwelt among us. We beheld His glory. Jesus Himself said it, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever," the shepherds, the dirty old man, you, me, whosoever will believe in Him would not perish, but have life everlasting. That's something to get choked up about. Amen.
It doesn't say, for unto you was born a prophet. It doesn't say, for unto you was born a decent human being. It says, for unto you was born this day in the city of David a Savior. And when we consider the message of the manger, we must consider that it leads directly to the cross. To the cross where Jesus gave his life, where his body was broken, where his blood was spilled for us, because he is our Savior. 1 Corinthians, we read these words. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink in remembrance of me." And so as we gather at the table this morning, remember that the manger leads directly to the cross. For unto you was born this day in the city of David a Savior. Would you pray with me? Merciful God, as we gather at your table this morning, renew in each of our hearts the reason why we celebrate this season. It's because for unto us was born a Savior, and he would save us by going to the cross. His body would be broken, and his blood would be spilled for each and every one of us. The only requirement of us is to place our faith in that saving work that he did on the cross. And so as we partake this morning, may you use this symbol of Christ's broken body and spilled blood as a continual reminder to us of the price that was paid. In Jesus' name, amen. We celebrate open communion at this church, and what that means is you don't have to be a member of this church or any church to partake. There is but one requirement, and that is that you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, that you have accepted the saving work that he did on the cross, symbolized this morning as the broken body and the spilled blood.
Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day
body of Christ, broken for our salvation. Blood of Christ, spilled for our salvation.
We'll sing our final carol. And as always, if God has spoken to you today or this week, and there's some public decision you would like to make, you would like to join this church, you would like to profess faith in Christ for the first time, or any other decision, I'll be at the front. I'd love to receive you, to pray with you, to rejoice with you. So you come if God's speaking as we stand and as we sing.
Almighty God, we thank you that you've given us this time together.